You're watching F1 2023 Technical Analysis, brought to you by Aramco. Williams has hauled itself off the bottom of the F1 pile, but has a long way to go even to become a regular point scorer. And that's the first big step it needs to take if it's ever to hope to get back to winning ways. That's because over the years, its technical capabilities and facilities have fallen behind those of its rivals. Team principal James Vowles says that 20 years of underinvestment is why we are where we are today. That's why even under the new ownership of Dorilton Capital, which took over the team in 2020, it's going to take a long time to recover. But the rebuild is well underway. So where is Williams now? What are its weaknesses compared to the rest? And why might the cost cap regulations hinder its recovery? Williams has scored points only twice in 2023, with Alex Albon finishing 10th in Bahrain, then enduring a 6-race drought before taking 7th in Canada. That puts it above only AlphaTauri in the championship. This upturn in form was the result of the introduction of a significant upgrade package, making major changes to the floor, engine cover, side pods and rear suspension. There was also a modified rear wing end plate. This reversed the recent trend of Williams struggling to escape Q1. Albon topped Q2 thanks to opting for slicks in drying conditions, starting the race 9th. After making his sole pit stop under the safety car, he was then able to keep faster cars behind to bag his best finish as a Williams driver. As Vowles put it in Canada, as the races ticked on and our competitors updated their cars, we fell back. The upgrades have put us back in a position where we can, if we do a good job, walk away with a point and start fighting our way back up in the championship. The upgrade is the biggest Williams will deploy this season, with a package expected to build on it due for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. It offered an increase in aerodynamic load, although given the Montreal circuit is not a high downforce track, and it's the kind of place where Williams has done well in the recent past, we have to reserve judgment. But it all performed as expected. What's more, even Williams' poor Spanish Grand Prix weekend showed the progress it has made. Barcelona is one of the most demanding circuits aerodynamically, and is therefore one where the downforce deficit to the Williams translated into a large pace disadvantage. In 2022, the fastest Williams lap time was almost 3.6% off the pace, but this year the deficit was a vastly reduced 2.478%. Had Williams produced its upgrade in time for that weekend, the gap would have been even smaller. The upcoming run of races, starting with this weekend's Austrian Grand Prix, will give a more accurate read on the pace of the Williams upgrade. Vowles suggested these tracks will provide a more potent realisation of the performance gain. Williams can now once again aspire to be a consistent Q2 car at least, and be in the mix to pick off further points finishes, even if a repeat of its Canada 7th place might be a long shot. Given Williams now has good, stable funding, unlike the financial strife it has so often battled in the 21st century, is this level of performance good enough? Well, clearly not for the long term, but it's a long road back. The arrival of Vowles from Mercedes as team boss has modified the team's direction, although there are still missing pieces. The team is without a technical director since the departure of François-Xavier de Maison, although David Warner holds the position on an interim basis, and is yet to appoint a new head of aero to succeed David Wheater. Vowles has indicated these appointments will not be rushed, but it's hoped they will be in place in the not too distant future. Dorilton has invested heavily in the team, not only clearing its debts when it took over, but also spending on overhauling and updating facilities. But this is not a quick fix, and one area Vowles has singled out as a big weakness illustrates the hangover of the old poverty trap Williams was once in. In a recent Sky Sports F1 podcast, Vowles admitted he was surprised by how far behind the team is in many areas. While he praised certain aspects, for example the quality of equipment in the machine shop, he was critical of the absence of an ERP system, that's Enterprise Resource Planning, tracking the progress of design and parts for maximum efficiency. Vowles describes this as basic infrastructure, and in Canada referred to emails going backwards and forwards to try and find out where a part is, rather than it going into a digital system. With the car comprising 17,000 parts, potentially each with only an email chain to track them, it's easy to get lost. Those with long memories might remember this being highlighted as a problem before. At the start of Williams' catastrophic 2019 season, the car was not ready for the beginning of testing, and the blame was put on the absence of just such planning systems. As then Deputy Team Principal Claire Williams said, the planning functions were weak. She referred to exactly the same problem Vowles does, however she also claimed it was resolved. So why wasn't the problem really fixed? Well, while it could be identified and some improvements were made, Williams at that time simply didn't have the cash to spend to do it properly. Remember, this was a team that wasn't far away from running out of credit and being forced to sell, so effectively was forced to do this on the cheap. As Vowles says, the software required to create that planning function can cost tens of millions. This is the poverty trap. While spending big to fix the problem long term is always cheaper, if you don't have that cash flow to do so, you often have to take the worse and even more expensive long term option. It's much like if you can't afford a quality pair of hard wearing shoes, forcing you to buy cheaper, shorter lived ones that require regular replacement. It's more expensive in the long term and much worse for your feet, but you have no choice. The race asked Williams Head of Vehicle Performance Dave Robson about this enduring problem in Canada. He said that Williams knew where the issues with planning were back then, but it didn't have the resources to fix things properly. Disadvantages such as this exist throughout the team, which was struggling for funding compared to its bigger rivals for much of the decade or two before Dorilton acquired it. That manifests itself in the car. Just compare the exquisite detail of the Red Bull underfloor revealed in Monaco to the far more basic Williams one we glimpsed in Spain. We don't have the rights to the best photos of this, but if you Google Williams F1 floor 2023, you'll see what we mean. Williams has the cash to tackle these problems now, but not only does it take time to do so, but there is also another constraint that Vowles is pushing hard to have tackled by the rulemakers. A quick interruption to tell you about a new podcast we've been running as part of our F1 Tech Show feed. Aramco F1 Focus takes a look at F1 in a unique way to get you thinking about Grand Prix racing just a little bit differently. Host of the show, Tim Sylvie, is here to tell you more.
Thanks, Ed. Nicely teed up. The show, as you rightly say, aims to get the audience thinking about F1 slightly differently. We hit topics with fresh perspectives, performance insights, and statistical surprises.
And you're not alone behind the mic, so tell us about the experts that sit alongside you.
So the show's broken down into three focus areas. Performance, where racer and broadcaster Alex Brundle provides the perspective from behind the wheel. Then we have a stat focus with the stat man to the stars, Sean Kelly. And for the final piece, we bring in big and interesting names from F1 to get proper nerdy with the likes of F1 engineer Pat Simmons.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to hear a driver's and statistician's view. And with Sean's ridiculous brain, which appears to be made up of every F1 stat and piece of data in history, you'd be amazed how the guys can make an entire segment on winning from low grid slots not only fun to listen to, but downright insightful and educational. You might just learn a thing or two.
Kind words, Ed, kind words. So if you haven't tuned in yet, please do come and have a listen. And if you want to join the conversation and get a shout out on the show, tweet us at Aramco F1 Focus.
When we talk about F1's cost cap, usually we're talking about the OPEX cost cap, so that's operational expenses. The baseline figure for this is $135 million, but with various other bolt-ons it adds up to around $10 million more than that. That's what you spend on designing, developing and running your car. But there's a less commonly discussed part of the cost cap which governs CapEx, that's capital expenditure. So that's what you spend on the acquisition, maintenance and upgrading of your fixed assets, all the machinery in your factory for example. Vowles has been actively lobbying for the CapEx regulations to be changed. Now these are a little different to the OPEX cost cap in the way they work, given it's measured over a period of 4 years. As Vowles puts it, it's a bit complicated but equates to around 36 million spread over that 4 years. His argument is that a recovering team like Williams must spend more on its basic infrastructure to catch up with teams that invested heavily in the past. That includes things like the ERP system it badly needs. Vowles suggests Williams needs to spend hundreds of millions to catch up with the investment of the biggest teams. As he puts it, that's a big deficit. Now, there are precedents for the capex limitations being tweaked to allow investment. For example, it was made easier to invest in expensive wind tunnels, the type that Aston Martin and McLaren have spent big on. Rival teams are open to the possibility, although there is caution about going back to the days of unfettered spending. After all, Vowles describes the amount Williams needs to spend as scarily large in terms of investing in its infrastructure. Note, that doesn't include its site and buildings, as that is outside the capex limit, but instead on the various machinery, simulators, software and manufacturing facilities the team requires. And there's lots more on Vowles' list. Whether or not Vowles succeeds in getting the capex rules eased, and there's a good chance there will be some concessions in the future, this illustrates just how far Williams still has to go. It may have a car that is, on average, only 1.7% off the pace, so that's around 1.4 seconds over an 80-second lap. But that's the sum of all these disadvantages. Williams is clearly improving, but given it has 20 years of decline to reverse, it's going to take many years to get onto the level of F1's front runners. Thanks for watching F1 2023 Technical Analysis, brought to you by Aramco.